is working with the YMCA's diabetes prevention and control programs. So those are community health-based programs looking to stop people from developing type 2 diabetes, or if they do have it, to control and manage the disease so that negative health outcomes don't develop. Um, with that and my my degree from VCU in exercise science and my own independent research, I've found some layers in the science and the literature that I think are not as widely known as they could be, um, and deserve to be shared. So I'm here today to talk a little bit about um, sort of beyond weight loss and um, what we can do to improve health parameters that are tied to, but also independent of weight loss. So that's what I'd like to talk about today.
So why do you think that ketosis is the answer?
So I would like to start off by saying that, and I can just run and go with this for the next half hour if you want. We can keep it discussion
Yeah,
based,
well, we'll
or
just have a conversation and I can ask questions as
sounds
I
good.
feel. Yeah.
Absolutely. So I want to start off by saying that all diets work for weight loss. That is to say that the most important thing that we are looking at when it comes to changing your weight is calories in versus calories out. How many calories are you taking in versus how many calories are you expending? This is a thermodynamic principle. It cannot be violated. Um, that equation is dynamic, right? So the calories that you are taking in are going to affect your output and vice versa. But if you put people in a metabolic ward, which is you are prescribing their exact calorie amounts, they are not getting any outside calories, and you're monitoring them for weeks at a time. Obviously, this is a really expensive study, but what those studies show is that it doesn't matter the proportion of protein, fat, carbohydrate, etc. Um, when you are eating fewer calories than you are expending, you will lose weight. Um, However, with the epidemic of diabetes and pre-diabetes, I think we're sitting just about at 90 million pre-diabetic Americans, and the majority of those, the vast majority, are undiagnosed. They don't know they have pre-diabetes. Um, that is another problem that a health issue that we are looking to address. And the root cause of that pre-diabetes developing into diabetes is insulin resistance. So, looking at ways to reduce your insulin resistance alongside with weight loss, the two go hand in hand, I think is going to be a key to solving a public health issue.
So for people, you said 90% of people don't even realize that they have diabetes. What are some key characteristics of someone who might have diabetes but don't realize it?
Um, so pre-diabetes and diabetes are a little bit different. It's actually just sort of a sliding scale of where you are on your A1C. Your A1C comes back in blood work if you're getting that done regularly, and it stands for glycated protein. So the percent glycated hemoglobin, sorry. So it's the percentage of your red blood cells that have a sugar molecule attached. And that happens just because if you have enough glucose in your bloodstream for long enough, um, it's going to stick around and put itself right on that red blood cell. So people with higher blood sugar on average, aka pre-diabetics and diabetics, are going to have a higher or lower A1C. Um, and sorry, what was the question again?
Just for people who, if they're pre-diabetic and they don't
Right.
realize it.
Symptoms. Yeah.
Mhm.
Um, well, if you're if you don't if you have insulin resistance, you're going to have a higher blood sugar for a longer period of time, and uh, that can have a lot of symptoms. Um, People have experienced this, I'm sure themselves. If you, to varying degrees, but if you've ever binged on high sugar dessert, you've been in a state of hyperglycemia, aka really high blood sugar, and it can result in um, dizziness, fainting, high thirst drive, um, lowered cognition. The tricky part about that is that a lot of the symptoms also correlate with hypoglycemia, low blood sugar. So if you actually are diagnosed as a type 2 diabetic, it is always important to monitor your blood sugar so you know which state you're in before you try to apply any medicine.
Okay, that makes sense. So for a lot of people that are on uh, this form right now, although many probably are interested in diabetes, I think a big thing is how ketosis can help them lose weight. So what do you think they can do, start implementing diet wise to begin losing weight?
Sure. So, like I said, all diets work. The important thing is that you are making an effort to track your calorie intake. The biggest factor in sticking to a hypocaloric, aka lower than your expending diet, is monitoring your calories in. It's pretty much a linear graph that the closer you adhere to that, the better your results as far as weight loss, waist circumference, inches lost, etc. So if you're not using a uh, macronutrient and calorie tracker like MyFitnessPal is a popular one. I'm a big fan of Chronometer, Crono, because that tracks micronutrients, vitamins, and minerals as well. I would suggest starting learning it. Um, it is a skill that you have to develop, and it's something that I would advise you be patient with as you get accustomed to it. But I think it also offers a great sense of control over, um, what you're doing with your body, what your plan is, and
Yeah, it can be hard. I've tried to do it before, and it's hard to
sure,
constantly remember and know exactly what you're eating all the time.
right, and no plan is going to be perfect. No one is going to have 100% adherence. There's going to be situations that come up where you can't track anything that's going on, and we just have to accept that you got to move past those. Try to stay as good as you can the rest of the time, and
Mhm.
over time that will even out.
Okay, so for ketosis, outside of weight loss, are there other benefits to implementing that diet?
Totally. So the biggest thing is that you can reverse and lower your A1C to the point where you would no longer be considered a type 2 diabetic or even pre-diabetic. I've met and talked to people that have accomplished this.
Is this permanent or is this just temporary?
It's as permanent as you can maintain that diet and lifestyle. So
So no
what
more
you
insulin
can't
shots?
Yeah, you can remove yourself completely from insulin shots, from metformin, um, and get off medication entirely. It is certainly an uphill battle,
Hmm.
especially depending on your starting point. But this like isn't true for other chronic diseases where you can completely alter and remove symptoms from through simply lifestyle changes. Um, I would say that you can't reverse damage already done um, from being a type 2 diabetic for an extended period of time, such as neuropathy, renal failure, etc. But you can prevent those conditions from worsening.
Hmm.
Um, so it's pretty simple. If you aren't aware of a ketogenic diet or being in ketosis, it's it's taking very few carbohydrates in per day. I mean, up to 0 to 20 grams. So most of your sources are going to come from fibrous leafy greens and other vegetables, but pretty much all starch sources are removed. So obviously, there's limitations and concerns about what calories replace those those carbohydrate calories. Um, it's pretty difficult to do as a vegetarian, for instance, but it can be done. I've seen people do it, and that's really the ticket, I think, as far as diabetes treatment in the future. Um, and that's nutritional ketosis, right? So the other thing I wanted to discuss was fasting ketosis. Either way, your body is receiving the signal. Your liver is saying, "Oh, I don't have any more stored glucose glycogen that I can use for organs that require a constant supply of energy. What else can I tap into?" And the answer is either dietary fat lipid or stored fat lipid. And that begins the process of increasing these ketone production um, so that your organs have something to use.
Hmm.
And the beauty of that, I think, is that it's very easy to toggle between nutritional ketosis and fasted ketosis. You can be on a ketogenic diet plan, um, and it's very seamless to incorporate fasting um, through, starting out slow. I would always advise, um, but then once you end your fast, you can jump straight back into you're still in ketosis. So you're not
Hmm.
going back and forth with your blood sugar levels like if you were fasting on a carbohydrate rich diet.
Gotcha. So we have a question in the chat from Kenyatta. She said, "I've lost weight through fasting. Should a person take multivitamins to get vitamins that aren't consumed through food?"
Um, that's a great question, Kenyatta. I think it's a pretty individual answer. Um, for intermittent fasting, what I would consider like the opposite of extended fasting, which would be greater than 24-hour periods, it's probably not necessary. You should be making up those micronutrients, vitamins, and minerals through the foods you do consume through your eating window. But the only way to be sure that you're hitting your requirements is to track those. So, um, like I said, I'm a big fan of Chronometer for that purpose. Um, they have this bar that fills up if you're hitting your daily requirements for vitamins and minerals, and it's pretty motivating for me to select more nutrient dense, healthier foods so I can meet those goals.
Yeah, I'll have
Um,
to look at that. I think it's important. I think it's helpful when they gamify it, when these apps
yes, for sure. Yeah,
make it
you
more
have to
interactive.
you have to find some sort of extrinsic motivation to continue. Yeah, and gamify anything to reward your dopamine system for sticking to a plan, I think is useful.
And can you spell the name of that app? The Chrono.
Uh, Kenyatta just spelled it correctly in the chat. It is
That is how you spell it.
Crono meter. Mm-hmm.
Great. Perfect. Yeah, I think that's a big one that will help a lot of people as well as weight tracking apps that, I only know but so much about those, and to learn
Sure.
of good ones are very helpful.
And I mean, I don't want to disparage attempts at living more healthily and weight loss without them. Um, I certainly think that if someone wants to stick to something prescribed and really simple, just because they don't have to expend mental energy um, making those kinds of decisions, which I think is a really very real barrier. That's beautiful. My only concern is that intuitive eating and training doesn't work great for a lot of people. Most people tend to over-report their activity levels and under-report their calories consumed. So without really putting a microscope on it, it can be hard to know. And that can become frustrating if you're not seeing the changes you want to see in over a matter of weeks and months.
So if someone started doing uh, ketosis and keto, how long should they expect for results to start to appear?
Um, I see you, AJ. I'll respond to that in a second. So the thing about a low carbohydrate diet is that if you are using the scale as your primary um, measurement, what attracts people to this style of eating initially is that um, when you're eating carbohydrate and storing glucose glycogen in your liver and muscle and adipose tissues, um, that glycogen is hydrophilic, meaning that it brings a lot of water into your cells. So you are, by consuming a lot of carbohydrate, especially if you're going from one into the other, right? If you're been eating very low carb or vice versa, you'll see a shift in your water weight that you're holding on to. So that can be 2 to 3 pounds of simply fluid. And if you switch to a very low carbohydrate diet, you can often see that drop within the first week or two. And that's, that can be motivating if your goal is scale weight loss, but you have to understand that that weight loss isn't all fat initially. So results will level off after that at at a time. But like with anything, any diet, a realistic goal that is sustainable over weeks and months on end, which everyone hates hearing, is about 1 to 2 pounds of fat loss per week.
Okay. So for AJ's question, does 16:8 ratio intermittent fasting 5 times a week work?
Um, AJ, it can. The big question we're thinking is in those 8 hour windows, and then on the weekend, I'm assuming, are you out eating the fasting that you're doing? That's really it. It comes down to calories in, calories out. So if you find that 8 hour eating window restricts your ability to take in enough calories that would keep you at the same weight or gaining weight, plus the extra 2 days of no restriction, then great. That hopefully that it works. But if you're not tracking, then you don't know. Simple answer that I can give.
Mm. Okay, so for the fasting ketosis versus nutritional ketosis, does it starts at nutritional and then becomes fasting and then it remains at fasting?
The only difference is, are you primarily using um, are you primarily burning the fat stored on your body, or the fat that you are um, consuming on a regular basis? And you can be in nutritional ketosis and gain weight as long as your calories in are higher than your calories out, honestly. Um, so the differences with that is that there are there are hormones that activate during fasting that do not activate when you are eating. Um, we all fast to a certain degree, at least every night when we sleep. So you can think of this as sort of a toggle for insulin in the simplest terms. Um, Insulin is released um, the largest amount for carbohydrate, and then protein, and then fat. So if you are um, limiting the amount of time that your insulin is both spiked to a high degree and time under the curve, aka duration of insulin release, basically the less that insulin is present, the more um, the more sensitive you will be to its effects, which is what we want. And I can go dive deeper into those sort of cellular mechanisms if you guys would care for that.
Yeah, we can start. Yeah.
Cool. So let's see here.
Well, I'm sorry, real quick.
Yeah.
Is this a limited diet or can you uh, do keto for too long?
Can you do keto for too long? Jury is kind of out on that. Um, what I have seen is that um, long term ketosis can cause your biome, your gut flora, to be less healthy. Um, just a consequence of eating fewer plant based foods, and less fiber that your your gut bacteria can colonize and thrive off of. So that may be one consequence of 6 month, 12-month, and beyond ketosis. The other the other thing is I would, be cautious about is carbohydrates are fantastic for sports performance. It is the premier energy source that you can access very quickly for um, short bursts of energy when you are required to do so through your activity. So those are hang-ups I have about it. But
So you wouldn't recommend going in ketosis if you're trying to build muscle or increase strength?
um, people, not really. No. I think that um, an environment where you're trying to build muscle is dependent on high insulin. Insulin is very anabolic, meaning that um, the way it affects the body, you're putting yourself in a state where you're more receptive to building muscle. Um, but the biggest contributing factors towards retaining your lean mass as you are attempting to lose fat mass, which is pretty much what we're trying to do health wise within physiological ranges. Um, your your health outcomes improve with a greater lean mass and a smaller fat mass to a degree. The biggest factors that contribute to that are going to be your protein intake and um, your capacity for intense training and exercise. Basically, the higher the intensity of your workouts, and assuming you're consuming an adequate amount of protein, um,
Mm-hmm.
you are not going to lose much lean mass as you lose fat mass.
So you'd recommend this for someone who wants to lose weight until they achieve their desired weight and then resort back to ketosis as they need?
Nailed it. That's how I view the utility of it. Absolutely.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so it's not I guess unless you're diabetic, would that be the same boat? Would you, if you,
Right. That's a trickier question. And once you have been diagnosed as type two, um, you know, to a certain extent, doctors, physicians will always view you as such. You might have longer lasting insulin resistance issues to where you really just don't want to or care to mess with carbohydrates too much anymore at all. But I'm afraid to say like that's pretty much the most I know about that. It's pretty new approach, hasn't been well studied.
okay. So AJ wrote another question: HIIT versus strength training for retaining lean mass. Which one would you choose?
Gotcha. So hit, meaning for those who aren't aware, high intensity interval training versus strength training. Um, they're both excellent. Um, like I said, the intensity of the exercise being the main contributing factor into retaining your lean mass as you lose weight. Um, Honestly, it's whatever you enjoy more, whatever you stick to. I think where people run into trouble, not I think, I know this, is where they are strength trainees in the gym with barbells and dumbbells and such, and then they they want to include cardio as well and think, oh, okay, um, intensity is good. I'm going to do hit on top of my strength training. That often leads to burnout, overtraining. You're trying to do too much with the same systems. For those who are already strength training, I think LISS, low intensity, steady state cardio, is the preferred choice. If you're trying to keep a cardio base so that it doesn't interfere with what you're trying to accomplish with your strength training.
Okay, so would that be for if you were doing heavy weightlifting and then you're doing HIIT or strength training on top of that, would you just have to increase your caloric intake or increase your diet to reduce the possibility of burnout?
If yeah, yeah, if performance is a concern at all, totally. Um, but even then, your well of recovery can only be tapped so deep. You can only eat and sleep and live stress free to recover, but so much.
Hmm.
So, I mean, and I'm a huge believer in self experimentation. If someone wanted to try both, I would not stop them. Those are just my words of caution.
So I read somewhere online that ketosis is even being considered as a possible solution for slowing down cancerous tumors. Is that a
Totally.
real study?
Yeah. No, it's honestly insane to me that this is being talked about more. Cancer cells, like most organs and tissues in the body, um, thrive on glucose. That is their preferred source of fuel. So when you take away that availability, um, you are signaling less growth and proliferation overall. Um, there's good literature out there with keto prior to or adjunct with chemotherapy, improving results. Fasting as well. So I think that if you or a loved one is fighting with cancer, it's certainly an avenue worth exploring and talking about with your doctor, because why wouldn't you?
No, I agree. And I assume when someone starts this diet, which is such a major diet switch, I assume there'd probably be some kind of blowback. How you feel? Would you get more energetic, less energetic at first, and then you kind of level out?
Great question. So there's definitely um, an adjustment period. It's bigger for some than others. A couple things are going on. One is you are, like I said, carbohydrates make you hold on to water, and when you're in ketosis, you're more likely to have a diuretic effect overall. So you're also eating foods not as high in potassium and magnesium, which is why you see a lot of people on ketosis promoting the supplementation of those two electrolytes in order to help your fluid dynamics. There's also what has been described in the literature as like a fat adaptation or a keto adaptation process that occurs that can take up to 2 to 3 weeks. Another reason why I think that um, swapping back and forth between fasting and high carbohydrate consumption is kind of silly, because you never get to this point where um, your body eventually realizes, hey, like we really aren't getting any glucose glycogen anymore. Let's start upregulating these enzymes and turning off and on genes at an epigenetic level to say, hey, this is how we're getting our fuel now, and making this process more efficient. So that's, it's increased upregulated enzymes, it's increased mitochondria in the brain and other organs. So side note on that too, with the brain as well, um, along with greater potential for energy there. The brain also thrives. One of the ketones that we use for energy is beta hydroxybutyrate, BHB, and that has a mild hormone receptor interaction with GABA or GABA. So that's a a neurotransmitter that modifies our stress response. It is anti-anxiety, and it's one of the reasons why people on keto diets rave about it, is because they love the feeling that that gives.
Okay, so we have a few questions
Yeah.
in here. One from AJ. The waist hip ratio is one low tech measure. Besides weight on the scale are the good indicators, and of course the energy levels.
Yep. Waist hip ratio is well studied as a good predictor of disease prediction and severity. Um, the the fat that you have around your internal organs um, is much more dangerous metabolically than the fat you have right under your skin, the subcutaneous fat. So if you are distributing your fat sores to your rear, your hips, rather than around the belly, you are likely to fare better when it comes to metabolic disease.
Okay.
Um, yeah.
So Kenyatta also asked, is there a good website that identifies a good list of things to avoid and consume on keto?
Um, there totally are. I sort of want to avoid um, directing traffic to one or the other. I think the biggest things to look for when you're sort of discerning fact from fiction are they citing credible sources? Claims should be backed up with citations to evidence in the medical literature. And if they aren't, then how is this author, this person, um, defending their claims? Um, that being said, one of the websites that I trust the most is going to be examine.com, a great resource for many frequently asked questions.
Okay. Examine.com. Great. And then AJ asks again, how do you know that you are in ketosis without any technology? Are you just feeling the symptoms and that's how you know?
Yeah. So there's two good ways to tell. Um, One, you can buy keto strips. Um, they're pretty inexpensive, and you can use those to measure whether you are excreting any ketone bodies or not. The other, less scientific way is one of the uh, ketone bodies that you produce is acetone, just like the nail polish remover. So it has a very distinct smell. Um, People refer to it as keto breath. So if that is something you notice, that's a good indicator. Um, Usually 5 to 7 days of 0 to 40 carbohydrates per day will put you in there, no questions asked.
Okay. Well, Andrew, I really appreciate you taking some time to talk to us about ketosis and fasting and how it can affect weight loss and diabetes. For everyone else that's still here, does anyone else have any questions for Andrew that hasn't already been addressed? All right. Well, I appreciate everyone taking the time to come here. We do have on February 17th, same time, same place. We're having another wellness forum with Jana Smith, the director of community health at YMCA. She's going to
Jenna.
be Ask the Experts with it's a weight loss segment, and you can look forward to seeing more about that in the future. But thank you again, Andrew, and
Thanks for having me.
thanks for everyone showing up. All right.